Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Hello everybody. My name is Amir, and today I would like to speak on the certain updates on the SMO and later the SMO itself. As we as we have seen, there have been increasingly deteriorating relations between Ukraine and Belarus. That has, of course, provoked equally deteriorating relations with Russia. Just recently, Alexander Mercouris explained how President Vladimir Putin warned in a speech to Russian military cadets that there is a serious risk of war with the collective West, and Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov confirmed that all negotiations with the US over Ukraine have ground to a halt. Meanwhile, the Europeans never bothered to negotiate in the first place. They did not even nominate a chief negotiator. Sergei Lavrov did confirm being in touch with EU officials sent by the President of the European Council, Antonio da Costa, but these talks were exploratory and ephemeral. Both Russian officials explained that Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia were mostly distractions that caused no real damage. Distractions meant to divert attention away from Russian gains on the battlefield. And speaking of gains, there has been an intriguing summary written by Marat Khairulin, the top reporter on the SMO, a conflict which has produced very experienced reporters on both the Russian and Ukrainian side. Marat summarized that the Ukrainian drone attacks across Russia are less effective than the ones conducted across the Republic of Crimea. The Republic of Crimea's proximity allows these drones to carry more explosives over shorter distances with little time for interception. Electricity and gasoline supplies there are running low, but that is the norm over the course of the SMO. As both Alexander and I can remember 2024 being a particularly bad year when it came to Ukrainian drone and missile attacks. But it should also be remembered that Western mainstream media regularly lies about the damage Ukraine actually inflicts. But Marat does agree that the drones were meant to distract attention away from Ukraine's poor fortune on the battlefield, to sow discord within Russia, and to court President Donald John's favor in Ukraine. Marat explained that the main Russian objective throughout the SMO has been to annihilate Ukrainian forces in Donbass and to secure it completely. The reason for Russia's slow pace in the Donbass is because of the terrain. This is a steppe land with urban sprawls. These urban sprawls surround factories, mines, railways, etc., all of which became fortifications with US assistance since the coup government came to power 8 years before the start of the SMO, thus creating a defensive line. This line has been almost completely broken. Only Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and a few other towns like Krasny Liman remain. Russia is already folding the flanks. Krasny Liman and Konstantinovka have almost been completely secured. Russia has perfected urban warfare to such a degree as to be proficient. This was demonstrated in Konstantinovka and Krasny Liman. There was also some intriguing revelations involving the Anchorage Summit last year, as Alex Christoforou detailed how President Vladimir Putin admitted in an interview that the Spirit of Anchorage is indeed an unwritten agreement which had Russian concessions in it. These concessions were proposed by the US and Russia agreed. However, no details have been made public yet. Now, Alex guesses that one such concession could be a Russian halt to advances in Kherson and Zaporozhye oblasts. Some reports do assert that this was proposed by Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff in Moscow just before the Anchorage Summit. President Vladimir also stated that in retaliation for Ukraine's invasion into Kursk Oblast, Russia will turn Sumy and Kharkov oblasts into buffer zones. We could therefore be seeing an expansion to the conflict in both the northern parts of in both the northern oblasts of Ukraine as well as the east. We may also see an expansion of that front if Ukraine chooses to invade Belarus. So far, there have been no signs in the affirmative as yet, but time will tell indeed how dire Ukraine's situation truly is, and if they truly want to open up a new front at any costs. Meanwhile, there has been an update with the arrests in Iraq. As Alex Christopher noted, Iraqi sources do confirm that Prime Minister Ali Faleh was indeed arresting Iraqi officials sympathetic to Iran. The key target was Iraq's Deputy Minister of Oil, Ali Marij. Apologies for the name, I never found any Arabic script of his name, who was making contracts with Iran. Prime Minister Ali is to travel to the US in a week. RT adds that a minimum of 47 Iraqi officials were arrested in the Green Zone. It also states that an anonymous Iraqi diplomat explained that the arrests were a necessary preparation for Prime Minister Ali's visit to the US, as they proved his loyalty. Upon taking power, Prime Minister Ali stated that he sought to control the state monopoly on weapons by disarming militias friendly to Iran. Worse, these raids coincided with Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs Abbas Araghchi's visit to Baghdad. There, he paid his respects to the martyred Lieutenant General Qasim Soleimani and the deputy leader of the Popular Mobilization Units (PMU), Abu Mahdi. He advocated his nation's readiness to expand cooperation with Iraq and the need to prevent regional escalations. Alex explains that if one combines this with the Lebanon-Israel agreement to disarm Hezbollah, the tankers sneaking through Omani waters, which I will go into later on, they all aim to weaken Iran's victory in the second imposed war. Additionally, there has been a large movement of US weapons from Europe into Southwest Asia, especially the UAE. All this could form the basis of another strike on Iran after the 60-day window is closed, or it could be used as leverage against Iran. Sarah of DD Geopolitics adds that the Iraqi MPs arrested had their immunities revoked during this. Iraqi politics is difficult to follow since there is not much information available online. And last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio explained that there will be no peace in Southwest Asia unless pro-Iranian factions in Iraq are neutralized. This, of course, is the equivalent to a casus belli on all anti-imperialist factions within Iraq, and is a signal for all US affiliates to confirm their loyalties. But she does not regard Prime Minister Ali as a US puppet, merely as a stooge. Now, personally, I disagree with that notion because of how high his placement is in both the business, law, and now political circles in Iraq. We shall see just how successful these arrests are and what the true implications are. all of which would happen far into the future, far after his visit to the US. Meanwhile, there has been some other developments. Pepe Escobar explained that Ansarullah will indeed attack Israel if it does not act according to the MoU, and given that Saudi Arabia also seeks to support the MoU, it is unlikely to retaliate if Yemen does indeed attack Israel. And as for the MoU itself, Larry Johnson explains that the MoU gives Iran complete authority to act against any vessel that violates its territorial waters, and it never states that the US has any right of enforcement. In fact, it urges the US to stop attacking and threatening Iran. The two sides clashed last week when a ship, the Ever Lovely, tried to penetrate the Straits of Hormuz. Two more ships tried to enter the Strait of Hormuz under the cover of Omani territorial waters, one of which had a US aerial escort. Iran attacked both ships and later bombed the Fifth Fleet's base in Bahrain. But the US did not escalate. It actually backed down. Larry assumes that this is because the US is currently withdrawing from Southwest Asia. The new security architecture currently being formed will pick up from where the US left off. Both Saudi Arabia and Qatar have signaled the US to evacuate all bases within their lands by 2027. As for further proof, Al Udeid Air Base, which was central to all US air operations thanks to its Combined Air Operations Center or CAOC, had been moved after it was hit to Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina. He argues that only a token force currently remains in Al Udeid. Similar actions have occurred throughout Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, and all without US public acknowledgement. It also should be remembered that these very US bases, which promised security to all GCC countries that hosted them, drew fire from Iran, shocking their hosts as their security was threatened due to US aggression towards Iran, the results of which have been a severe oil shortage, culminating in what I call the oil depression that has already hit Europe and that has already hit the EU rather, as Russia remains safely insulated due to its own resources, and is bound to hit North America by August. Excuse me. But back to the MoU itself. Pepe Escobar explains that the MoU only appears to be in deep coma. Talks will resume after the funeral of Grand Ayatollah Ali later this week. He confirms that Vice President James Vance has repeatedly voiced his support for it, but is facing resistance from the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. By July 9th, Iran should receive more of its frozen assets. If this happens, then it is safe to assume that the MoU is back on track. So far, the US has not been respecting any of its commitments, as has been demonstrated with these recent tankers. It is also important to remember that Iran is not in a hurry, and that it has not achieved much so far, hence the MoU's sluggish pace. But there are positives. Even without the MoU, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Iran aim to normalize a defense relationship. The UAE will be a latecomer to this, and Egypt has expressed interest in this relationship due to the US's abandonment of the region following its defeat in the Second Imposed War. All of this is under a Pakistani security umbrella, with Iranian approval. As we can see, the situation across Southwest Asia and Europe remains fluid. There will be indeed many hurdles to the MoU. In fact, the MoU may not survive it is possible that the MoU may not survive the end of this year. But what it has already achieved has indeed changed global politics and global economics. Meanwhile, in Europe, Russia continues to dominate the battlefield. And if a Ukrainian invasion of Belarus does happen, the SMO's status will be upgraded under Russian law to that of a war footing, given Belarus and Russia have treaty obligations for mutual security assistance, much like how Russia has one with the DPRK, which did indeed result in some DPRK military units engaging with the Ukrainian invaders in Kursk Oblast. But back to the MoU, back to Southwest Asia, we can already see new concentrations of power emerging. The US and by extension Israel have now become isolated as the region's players continue to consolidate their own relationships with each other, as opposed to concentrating on the US and Israel as it had been over the past as it had been in the past over the course of the Cold War and with the Abraham Accords respectively. We shall see exactly what, if any, we shall see exactly what the situation we shall see exactly what will happen with latecomers like Iraq and the UAE during these fluid developments. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to your comments and any questions or critiques you have. Please like, share and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next video. Goodbye.